Hi, I'm Oliver Gao. I'm the director of Cornell Systems Engineering Program, and I've been conducting these systems conversations with our prestigious speakers that we invite to Cornell to give a talk on systems. So today we are very delighted to have Dr. Geoff Boeing, who is an assistant professor of urban informatics and planning in the School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs at Northeastern University. He is a faculty affiliate of the Network Science Institute and also the Global Resilience Institute. So it's really, I think, a very good cross-disciplinary background as well as practice of the area that he's working on. He received his PhD in the city and the regional planning from the University of California at Berkeley. And he developed and maintains this OSMX street network modeling software, which I believe has benefited many researchers and students. Not to only across the country, I believe across probably the world. So welcome, Geoff, to our system conversations.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was really amazed about the work you have been doing. Not only me, I believe our audience will be very curious to find out more about you and how your career evolved and how your vision evolved surrounding all the work you are doing. So we want to know more about you. So whatever you want to tell us about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Prior to getting my PhD in city planning, I studied computer systems and information management as an undergrad and master's degree. And I went back to school for planning, kind of bringing that technical, methodological lens into trying to address planning problems. When I started working on my dissertation, I was interested in trying to better understand street network patterns across cities. When I dug into that research literature, you would tend to find sample sizes of like maybe 10, 20, 30 cities or just case study research. But it's really hard to do a lot of statistical inference from those kinds of sample sizes or to really make claims more broadly about cities and places.
Yes.
So I wanted to find out why. And in the end, it was because we didn't really have the right tools to be able to pull in data rapidly, build models that were consistent and theoretically sound, and then conduct analysis on it. Everything was just being done with these ad hoc toolkits and ad hoc methodologies. So that's where OSMNX came in. I developed that as part of that broader project to be able to download data, model and analyze street networks, and do it at scale so we can look at tens of thousands of street networks cross-sectionally, trying to understand more broadly what places are like.
That's wonderful. And I can feel, of course, as you mentioned to me earlier, right? You did your undergraduate kind of more in the computer science background, and then you went out to work, for a while, and then you decided to come back for a PhD in city and regional planning. I feel kind of, in those years you were working in the real world, from background CS and then coming to a decision to city and regional planning. There must be something that very important, kind of that changed your, because you need kind of usually in CS you are thinking about coding and the program, and now you're looking at this city planning at a macro level. So what happened during those years?
I think partly my story is similar to a lot of other people's who come to something urban studies adjacent later in life. It was just spending so much time in cities, in different kinds of cities, and living different places in the country and around the world, seeing what's similar or different between places, what seems to work well, what I liked and what I didn't like, what seemed just or unjust about different cities and societies, sparked that interest where I wanted to know more about why these things came to be. So often when we move through urban space, it feels like the built form around us is inevitable. This kind of naive inevitability of it's just the way things are. But as systems researchers or planners, we know it's not the case. These are the outcomes of millions of human decisions and decades, centuries, or sometimes millennia of people deciding either very deliberately from central planning or through self-organization of other communities, how to produce these kinds of places where we live. So from that initial curiosity, I kind of wanted to go back and learn more to try to make an impact in that space.
So wonderful. Apparently you are a great observer. Like we are living your life, you are observing, right? And I think I think it's very interesting. When people are observing, and especially people who want to do something, I think when you observe things, and you use the word like sparked you, right? So, and when people got sparked, and then you either want to go, you want to go out the real world to do something that is impactful, or you want to make it, I want to go back to school so that I can equip myself better to go out again, to change the world, to make the world a better place. So, speaking of that, so what do you view, either before from experience or currently, what do you view as some key challenges that we, human beings, or our society or our cities, what do you see as the key challenges that you feel kind of driven to address?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of this comes back to something we were talking about briefly earlier. From a planner's perspective, there are different modes of planning. So sometimes planning is about this sort of technocratic problem solving, right? We'll look at the science and then we'll make cities better. Other modes of planning are about figuring out what people want and trying to find a common consensus among the population. But all of these things are constrained by politics in the end. Planners are slaves to the political system in the city. So in the end, it can be really hard to fix urban problems through these technocratic solutions that we all know would work if we could just implement it as technocrats. But in the end, sometimes those things don't work, right? Unexpected outcomes are kind of the history of planning in a nutshell. And even beyond that, sometimes there are powers that be in cities, and the role of power in planning is really important because it constrains our ability to have more just outcomes, or to be able to have even more quote unquote rational decisions about how we're polluting in the city, or where congestion is arising, or the commuting patterns that arise because of single family zoning surrounding our transit stations. It can be really hard to change that even if planners were trained to know what to do differently in that case, because of vested interests that want it to be otherwise, for good reasons or for bad reasons. Yes. I think that's kind of a fundamental challenge in planning right now of now what? What does that mean as a discipline?
That's true, and I think I think nowadays, especially in kind of with this abundance of data, and also this social media, and also kind of essentially everybody nowadays becomes a mobile sensor, like, which means that we are we could be a beneficiary of the data, and also we are now becoming the source of the data. And all in a sudden, it's kind of, I believe, not only I think the planning discipline, but also civil engineering. Yeah. We are really thinking about kind of where we should go as as a discipline, right? So you mentioned, I think, one interesting earlier. You said that our somehow, unfortunately, under some circumstances, like planners or engineers, we unfortunately became slaves, right? So, but there are also opportunities. So essentially, we feel we take pride in. As technical people, we pride ourselves thinking that we are intelligent, we are smart.
Right.
Right. So that's true. We're technically smart, we're technically intelligent. But how can we, in the future, as planners or as engineers, how can we kind of change our role to be, say, for example, quote unquote, to be a slave, instead of how can we become effectively smart? Not just the kind of intellectually smart, effectively smart. What I mean, like, how can we have our voice and have our intelligence to be better applied, to be better used by the decision makers, or even for example, some people, technically the technical people, they become decision makers themselves. Right. So what would be a effective path for this intellectual smartness to become effective smartness?
No, that's a great question. There have been a lot of debates in the planning literature and in planning theory about what the nature of planning even ought to be, or how it should even be conducted. as a field, is it about planning cities for other people, or is it just about working in the community and trying to help build consensus and empowering those voices, especially trying to empower marginalized voices? Or is it a mode of technocratic expertise that should be applied more top down to cities? I think on the practical side, things that planners can do. First is more effective communication. I think that goes for science and research more broadly than any individual discipline, or urban or otherwise. But so often we lock up years of knowledge and work into a paywalled journal article written in esoteric language that can be very difficult to interpret for a layman, let alone policymakers who might have a master's degree in your field. Remember, as a master's student, I didn't find it very easy to read a lot of papers in my discipline.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So one thing that I try to emphasize a lot is doing simple things like writing blog posts. Or
I like your blog a lot.
Thanks, I
Yes.
appreciate that. Just trying to translate into plain English. What's cool about what I did recently? What's something that I found out that is interesting? How might someone else use this thing that I made to try to answer some questions for themselves? For me, it's about trying to democratize and disseminate knowledge and methods so that other people can do it for themselves, rather than having academics being the gatekeepers of knowledge and information, trying to make it more about empowering the community.
Yeah, I think I like your point a lot. It's basically kind of through more effective and efficient communication to empower the community such that the community can work with us together to make the change, instead of as a kind of just stay in the ivory tower,
Right.
and produce these papers that other people in the ivory tower can understand,
Exactly.
but doesn't get out. It's kind of due to the lacking of not only communication, but also due to the lacking of the intention to engage.
Right.
I don't think that communication is too difficult for academics to learn.
Yeah.
But rather, I think it's more difficult thing is that because I think tenure evaluation or whatsoever,
Exactly.
that kind of academic culture such that unfortunately a lot of academics not losing the interest kind of when they adjust their priorities, right? This kind of thing that what you are doing probably doesn't come up to the top of the priority list for the majority of the research.
Yeah, and I like to think that tool building and public communication and blogging have a lot of value, but you're right, the incentive structure doesn't really motivate them in the tenure track. Part of the way I've tried to toe that line is that tool building for me has opened up research pathways for empirical work now.
Yes.
That I'm very well positioned to do because I have access to these useful data and models to answer a lot of interesting questions. And for blogging too, I think it helps to make junior faculty and PhD candidates more of a name brand. It's so much easier when you're on the job market if people recognize your name in the stack of applications. And
Yes.
certainly you can't be spending your whole workday on things other than publishing and teaching your courses, but if you can fit some of that in, I think it helps to make you a more well-rounded academic.
Absolutely, and also as you said earlier, I think just now, because of this connection to the real world, that provides you with sources of new research problems that you can address. So now I think you listed all these kind of very good, very important challenges, and also your philosophy to address this. So I would now like to dive a little bit deep into what specific approaches or methodology or solutions do you see as important that can help address those challenges that we just described, we just talked about?
So for me, coming at a lot of these questions from an analytics or an urban informatics and science perspective, what I'm interested in doing is helping to make, say, urban informatics more critical. So rather than just being a top-down, sensing, deciding, technocratic enterprise, thinking about both how we can question the roles of power and privilege in who these data sets are representing, but also thinking critically about the right to not be observed in data, or the right to more informal modes of the city rather than just trying to formalize everything as planners. I think some of the big problems about, if we think in transportation systems, so traffic congestion or congestion pricing, a lot of those tend to be political concerns foremost. What I like to do from my perspective is try to make modeling, analysis, data acquisition, empirical work more consistent, more reproducible, so that we can have a stronger voice in those political processes.
Mm-hmm.
I think this goes back to what we were just talking about with making our research more legible to laymen and policymakers. I think that a key thrust for the urban informatics space over the next few years will be about actionable findings. It will be about scientific legitimacy, so this idea of reproducibility rather than just, here's a really important claim I'm making based on this data you can't see, and this toolkit that I'm only half documenting in the paper. Allowing policymakers to use the tools that we produce for a couple empirical papers, open sourcing them so that other people can do it in their own cities. I feel like those are really some key ways that we can try to impact cities positively in this space.
You have given, say, urban informatics, I think, a deeper layer of thinking there. The reason here is why I feel this way. Because nowadays, when people talk about urban informatics, or people talk about data science, like all these kind of, these things are everywhere. When people talk about urban informatics or data science, they a lot of time confuse it together with big data.
Right.
The more data, they say, oh, I got more data, I'm doing informatics. The more data, I'm doing, this kind of data science.
You can put a sexy label on it, right?
Yes, exactly. But I think what you just mentioned is really, this informatics is not only about being able to monitor. Actually, more important thing is that what do we want to monitor? What can be monitored? And what things we still want to keep, for example, in the privacy. What things we should not, kind of from ethical point of view, from legal point of view, and more importantly, from for example, from the human needs point of view. Because a lot of times, like for example, in non-democratic countries, like kind of if people are monitored all the time, right? So this way, what is that information collected for?
Right.
That might be collected against, right, the utility, the need of individuals. So I think that's why what I mean by I think your interpretation of urban informatics actually has a deeper layer of what informatics is for and what informatics can be collected. Yeah, I feel that's actually more important than just kind of blindly make everything monitored.
Absolutely, yeah. I think too often informatics training and practice tends to focus on these sort of automatically harvested, sensed data sets. In some ways because it was once harder and therefore more novel, but now because it's easier in a lot of ways.
That's right.
Once we get the infrastructure set up to collect this data,
It'll happen automatically.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And we've lost a lot of those skills of collecting small data, contextualized data, the sort of the careful nuance where we know the sampling biases and we're more cautious about what they mean. For a lot of sense data, we just say, well, it just is what it is. It's whoever walked down the street, and therefore we'll make some inferences about it. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that all demographic groups are being represented carefully there. It doesn't mean that the conclusions we're drawing more broadly about city planning are well situated in questions of human life and urban living and equity.
Yes, you talk about, I think you alluded a little bit about kind of what your vision is and the solutions you offered for this challenge that we have. I don't know if you mind sharing with us, for example, your vision and kind of your plan for example, for the coming 3 to 5 years. To what do you want to do to bring your vision into reality?
Yeah.
In the coming years.
Oh wow. Yeah. So I guess partly it's about training students. I feel like now that the first handful of urban informatics, urban analytics, urban science programs, the master's level, have been coming online in the past few years. This is a really unique opportunity for faculty in engineering, city planning, computer science to work together to try to train technical students with more qualitative nuance. Think about human and ethical issues in problems that are so often treated as just an optimization problem when really there's so much more to it than that. And and there are lives at stake a lot of the time if we look naively or if we don't look interdisciplinarily at it. Yeah. So that's a key thing for me as an academic, beyond research, training a generation to go out into practice and do it better than what's been alarming so many of us over the past decade or so.
Yes. The training, as academic, like training future generations, actually it could be probably the most powerful because you all in a sudden like you basically pass your idea on to this large cohort of the student that you're training instead of not instead, in addition to you publishing your paper which is read by small amount of people. I think that training is definitely very important. Actually, this kind of naturally led me to my follow-up question is about here this Cornell system engineering program. I don't know if people mentioned to you, we started this PhD in systems about 3 years ago. And on one thing I want to emphasize, which I feel good about, is actually, we call us, this is a program, this is a systems engineering program, right? But when we applied for a PhD degree, when we applied to offer this PhD degree, actually, we call it PhD in systems. We dropped the word engineering.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so basically, the reason is that because, system engineering has a very deep root in military application. Like, after World War One and World War Two, system engineering got developed a lot. And even nowadays, application of system engineering, like kind of, the military, aerospace, they use a lot. But Cornell system engineering program, actually, we realized didn't cover those traditional areas. We want to distinguish ourselves by focusing on commercial systems, especially human-centered complex systems, how human interact with, building environment, interact with technologies. So all these things. So that's why we realized actually human behavior, social science, psychology, these disciplines are similarly important for this system. So that's why we dropped the word and then such that we open the door for anyone with any background, as long as they feel they have enough preparation, they feel they have a desire for system challenge, and they can come to this program. I give you this background. Now I want to ask you what would you like to tell our system student here, such that they can better prepare, they can better make use of the resources here at Cornell and beyond, and also kind of try to get them on a path, for example, as successful as you have had, or so basically, what would you like to tell these future generations of system people?
Yeah, I guess I would start by saying that the path they've chosen is incredibly important. So many of the problems that we face as a society are really systems problems. A lot of my research tends to take a complex systems and complexity science frame to thinking about these things, either through looking at networks through the lens of network science, which draws heavily from a lot of complexity studies, or even thinking more broadly about design and urban form and how it supports complex human ecosystems. As a student in the program, I think the important thing will be positioning your work. If you're interested in a faculty job after the PhD program, positioning your work so you have a clear trajectory into a certain kind of department. So if you're interested in cities, attending conferences, writing papers in journals that make you a known quantity in the space that you are wanting to move forward with in your career. If you're more interested in engineering questions, similarly working toward the engineering space. And as somebody who does a lot of interdisciplinary work, one of the both benefits and challenges that I always face is being able to share my work with a large audience because people from different disciplines will see it, but also positioning myself so that I seem like a natural fit in one single space in the end. And I imagine a lot of the students in the systems PhD program will have similar opportunities and also a similar line to toe as they position themselves in the job market later.
I think that's great advice, and I really like you talk about like positioning. I think that's actually very, very important. It's not really about, okay, I just work on things blindly and only understand, oh, I want to get that job, but you can see like the job is over there and you are here, you are not very well positioned.
Right.
Right. I think that's a very, very key, I think, very important advice to our students. I think we're getting to the end of our conversation. You may notice that in our conversation, I refrained from asking you questions about your talk that you are going to be giving, I think, in about 15 minutes. But I do want let our audience who will be watching this video to know that actually Dr. Geoff Boeing, he will be given a systems seminar talk right after this, and his talk is going to be on computational modeling and analysis in transportation system design. And I believe this is going to be an exciting talk. So if you're interested, this talk is also posted online. So I just want to let people know. So Geoff, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
It was great chatting with you.
Very nice talking to you.